Welcome to Kidmissing TV. I'm your host, Angelina Wilson. This is the case of Nora Fuller. She was 15 when she was murdered in 1902. Yeah, you heard that correctly. She said that she was going to meet with a man for a job as a nanny because she found his ad in the paper. Her mother was a single mother of 3. She didn't come home that night or the next. They began searching for her. Her naked body was found 1 month later in an empty apartment. Her killer planned carefully, was very cunning, and that's what makes the case so hard to solve. She may have been meeting with a much older man that she told her friend was her boyfriend. This was in San Francisco, California, by the way. Here are pictures of newspapers from the time. Between January and March, they were captivated by the mysterious murder of this young lady. The SFPD had extreme pressure on them because of all the coverage. There was a 3,000-word feature story written by San Francisco Police Captain Thomas A. Duke. He was retired. In his book, Celebrated Criminal Cases of America, published in 1910. According to his story, the police were eventually able to identify a strong suspect, or so they believed at the time. Unfortunately, he left town before he could be arrested and was never seen or heard from again. They believe there's circumstantial evidence connecting this man to the murder. Dozens of other men were rounded up and interrogated because of all the coverage. Again, see coverage. I know some of it's going to be blocked by the poster, so we'll try to put it over here. The San Francisco Call, published on February 11th, 1902, 3 days after Nora's body was found, they had 2 entire interior pages, and that's what I was showing you over here. There was also an article in 2016 in the San Francisco Gate.com. There she is. You'll see this picture in the poster right next to it, but I just wanted to show it to you. Oops. Okay, here's something that's very interesting. Her original name was Eleanor Parline. She was born in China in 1886. Her father was an engineer on a Chinese steamer, the Taiwo, and he was sitting asleep in a steamer chair on the deck of the vessel while at sea. Shortly after he was seen in that position, his services were required in the engine room, but when they went to get him, he wasn't there. A year later, Mrs. Parline married a man named W.W. Fuller in San Francisco, but 7 years later she obtained a divorce. As she had 4 small children, Mrs. Fuller experienced much trouble in getting along. In 1902, she lived at 1747 Fulton Street. At that time, Nora, who was then 15, decided to quit school and seek employment. On January 6th, she wrote to a theatrical agency after stating that she had a fairly good soprano voice, asked for employment. 2 days later, this advertisement appeared in the Chronicle and Examiner. Quote, "Wanted, young white girl to take care of baby, good home and good wages." End quote. And it also directed anyone answering the ad to address communications in care of the newspaper. Nora Fuller answered it, and on Saturday, she received the following letter in the mail. "Miss Fuller, in answer to yours in response to my advertisement, kindly call at the popular restaurant 55 Geary Street and inquire for Mr. John Bennett at 1 o'clock. If you can't come at 1, come at 6. John Bennett." End quote. Oh, it was a postcard. Okay, she took the postcard with her. Okay. A nervous and irritable voice called her mother later that night. Her 12-year-old sister answered, and she said it was Nora and that they wanted her to start nannying at once, and she was at the home of Mr. Bennett at 1500 Geary Street. Except it was a vacant lot. Oh, it was just her 12-year-old brother. I'm sorry. And she told him to tell his sister to come home and go to work on Monday. And she said, all right. But before anything more could be said by the boy, the receiver at the other end hung up. Nora Fuller never came home. A few days later, the distracted mother notified the police. F.W. Crone, Krone, who was the owner of the restaurant, of Popular Restaurant, I guess that was the name of it, was questioned, and he stated about 5:30, January 11th, a man who had been a patron of his place at different times during the past 15 years, but whose name he did not know, came to the counter and stated he expected a young girl to inquire for John Bennett, and if she did, to send her to the table where he was seated. He was about 40 years old, about 5 feet 9 inches tall, weighed about 170 pounds, wearing a brown mustache, well-dressed and refined appearing. Apparently, she never made it to see him. He always ordered the porterhouse steak, but he only ever ate the little piece of tenderloin that's attached to it. So he got the nickname of Tenderloin. Okay. 3 days before Nora's disappearance, a man using the name of C.B. Hawkins called at Umbsen, UMBSEN, and Company's real estate office, and talked to a clerk named C.S. Lehenier, Lahenier, Lehenier, inquired for particulars regarding a 2-story frame building for rent at 2211 Sutter. He agreed to the terms. He had no references as he was new to the city. The clerk let him have a key after paying 1 month's rent in advance, and he signed C.B. Hawkins to a contract. Interestingly, his description was identical to the description of Mr. Bennett. and he said he was stopping off at the Golden West Hotel with his wife. On the following day, the real estate firm sent E.F. Bertrand, a locksmith and handyman, in their employ to the Sutter Street house to clean it up. Many days after this, a collector for the firm, named Fred Crawford, reported the house was still vacant. And he went to the hotel. And guess what? They had no idea who Mr. Hawkins was. On February 8th, the month's rent was up, and a collector and inspector named H.E. Dean was sent to the house. They used a lot of initials back then. Using a pass key, he entered. When he found the door to the back room closed, he opened it. The shade was down. The room was in semi-darkness. He discerned a bright-colored garment on the floor. But he kind of figured something was wrong. He ran out of the building, ran into Officer Gill, and requested him to go back with him because he saw something on the floor, but he wasn't sure. When they lifted the shade, they found Nora's body on a bed. And there were two brand new sheets, a blanket, and a quilt. An old chair was the only other furniture in the room. Neither food nor dishes were around. And there was no means of heating or lighting the house, as the gas was not connected. Her clothing were in the bedroom, and her purse, which contained no money, but a card with the following inscription: Mr. M.A. Severbrinnick of Port Arthur. It was subsequently learned that this man sailed for China on the Peking 3 hours before Nora Fuller left home on January 11th. On the floor was the butt of a cigar, and on the mantelpiece in the front room was an almost empty whiskey bottle. No toilet articles, one towel. Many letters were found in the place addressed to Mrs. C.B. Hawkins, 2211 Sutter Street. They were from furniture houses and contained either advertisements or solicitations. A circular letter, meaning somebody's circular, it's an advertisement, addressed to Mrs. Hawkins, and bearing a postmark of January 21st at 11 p.m., or 10 days after the disappearance of Nora Fuller, had been opened by someone and then placed in the girl's jacket, which was found in the room. Mrs. Fuller identified the clothing as belonging to her daughter. And subsequently identified the body as her daughter. No trace was ever found of the postcard that Nora received from Bennett. Dr. Charles Morgan, the city toxicologist, examined her stomach contents and found no traces of drugs or poison, save for an apple. There was a slight congestion of the stomach, possibly due to partaking of some alcoholic drink, when the stomach was not accustomed to it. Dr. Basigalapi he was the coroner that did the autopsy. I can't pronounce his name. Basigalapi, Bacigalupi, found 2 black marks on her throat, one on each side of her larynx, and there was a slight congestion of the lungs. She had died via strangulation, and her body was mutilated. Detective John Seymour then became in charge of the case. And he went to the furniture store located at 848 Mission Street and stated, wait a minute, a salesman at the J.C. Kavanaugh furniture store named B.T. Schell, Schell, at 848 Mission Street, stated that at 5 p.m. January 9th, a man of the same description as Hawkins or Bennett, and wearing a high silk hat, called and said that he wanted to furnish a room temporarily. He purchased 2 second-hand pillows, a pair of blankets, a comforter, and top mattress. He insisted that the goods be delivered at night or not at all. Wow. The customer then wanted to know what assurance he had that the salesman would not substitute another mattress. That's weird. And Schell suggested that he put his initials on the mattress as a means of identification. Acting on the suggestions, Hawkins used a large heavy pencil and wrote the letters CBH on the mattress after leaving word to deliver the article that night to the Sutter Street address. The delivery boy, Lawrence C. Gillen, stated that he had to work overtime in order to take the articles at night. When he arrived, he rang the doorbell. The man came to the door. It's the same man, same silk hat. He asked him to turn the lights on so he could see, and he said, "Never mind, leave the things in the hall." And then an employee at the Standard Furniture Company named Richard Fitzgerald at 745 Mission Street stated that a man of Bennett's description bought a bed and an old chair from him on January 10th. And engaged an expressman, Tom Tobin, to deliver them to the same address. And then sheets, towel, and pillowcases were purchased at Mrs. Mahoney's dry goods store on 92 3rd Street, which is around the corner from one of the furniture stores. Interestingly, there was a small piece of the Denver Post next to her body dated January 9th. And there was a mailing label on it, to the Office of the Railroad Employees, Journal 210, Parrott Building. When this paper arrived at the Parrott Building, it was given by Exchange Editor Scott to Mr. Herbert, a delegate from Denver, to a railroadsmen's convention then in session in the assembly room at the Parrott Building. After glancing at it, he threw it on the table, and some other delegate picked it up and took it to Dennett's restaurant, where he left it on the dining table. The steward of the restaurant, Mr. Helbish, picked it up. After taking it to the counter, began to read it, believing it was the San Francisco Post. Then Mrs. Drysdale, the cashier, glanced over, and she laid it down, and nobody knows how it got to the Sutter Street address. Jeez. It's funny because that thing went all over the place, and they were able to trace it from person to person. That's insane. A 17-year-old girl named Marge Graham met Nora in June of 1901, and they became close friends. Madge was a boarder at Nora's house for a while, till her guardian, attorney Edward Stearns, requested her to move away because a lawyer named Hugh Grant was a frequent visitor at the Fuller home. She said that Nora frequently spoke to her of having a friend named Bennett. Also, she believed that the advertisement was a trick concocted by Nora and Bennett to deceive Mrs. Fuller. This is a description of what John Bennett looked like. This is not in the poster, so I want to show it to you. Okay. She also told police that Nora often telephoned some man, and that one day Nora requested her to tell Mrs. Fuller that she and Nora were going to the theater that night. Madge did as requested, but she stated that instead of going with her, Nora went with a man. And someone gave Nora complimentary press tickets to the theater. A Menke, who ran a grocery store at Golden Gate and Central Avenues, stated that Nora used his telephone quite often, even though she had one of her own at home, a few blocks away. Theodore Kytka, Kytka, was a handwriting expert who made an examination of the original slips filled out by Bennett for his advertisement for a young girl, and also the signature of C.B. Hawkins to the contract when he rented the house, and found both were written by the same person. February 19th, the coroner's jury rendered the following verdict, quote, that the said Nora Fuller, aged 15, Nativity, China, residence, came to her death at Sutter Street home in the city and county of San Francisco through asphyxiation by strangulation on a day subsequent to January 11th and before February 4th at the hands of parties unknown. She died within 24 hours after midnight January 11th. In view of the heinousness of the crime, we recommend the governor offer a reward $5,000 for the discovery and apprehension of the criminal. Achille Ross, Foreman. End quote. The handwriting analyst looked at 32,000 change of address cards, and he found 3 signatures that bore considerable resemblance to Bennett/Hawkins' style of penmanship, and one of these 3 was almost identical. This proved to be the signature of a man in Kansas City, Missouri. So Captain Seymour headed there. But the man had nothing to do with the crime. Wow. 2 days later, a gentleman connected with the local paper notified the police department that a clerk in their employ named Charles B. Hadley had disappeared. It was afterwards said that he was short in his accounts with the employer. Detective Charles Cody was detailed to locate the man, and he found that he had lived at 647 Ellis with a girl born and raised in San Francisco who had assumed the name of Ollie Blasier, Blasier, because of her infatuation for a notorious character known as Kid Blasier, or Blasier. No trace of him was found. And the body of Nora Fuller was discovered, and photographs of the signature of C.B. Hawkins and the CBH on the mattress were published in all the papers. The Blasier woman had a photograph of Hadley in her room, upon the back of which he had written his name, C.B. Hadley. Seeing the great similarity in the handwriting, she delivered this to Detective Cody, who in turn delivered it to handwriting analyst Kytka. He determined at once that the person who wrote C.B. Hadley on the photograph also wrote CBH on the mattress and C.B. Hawkins on the contract. He wore a false brown mustache. Purchased one at a Japanese store on Larkin Street. Another companion of his said he had worn a false mustache as well. Because this guy had connections to Canada. Many believe that Mr. Hadley committed suicide and that he was responsible for the murder. Was this even his name? Who knows? It was pretty easy to change your name at a whim back then. There were no social security cards, or, you didn't need a driver's license in a lot of places, so it was pretty easy to tell people your name was whatever. But it's interesting that he used the same initials. So, God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I am going to start editing. Yeah, I don't know. How much editing I'm going to get done, but I'm going to try. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you tomorrow on the other channel, and Friday on this channel for an updated look at John Doe 24. Yeah, this is quite an interesting case. And so many twists and turns. It's crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So, I hope that you did enjoy this video. Unfortunately, there'll be no justice here for this case, but again, it's a historical case, and it's a child. And there should have been justice then, but and I think this guy is an excellent suspect. Let me know what you think. Anyway, my battery's dying, so please subscribe to both channels and hit those bells. We're trying to get to 200 on the other channel and 500 on this channel. Bye, guys.